Okay, so now we have a B flat chord progression. And again, even though there's a lot of chords here, the basic chord progression is still there. Let's take a look at this. So we wanted 4 measures of B flat, so we have, starting with B flat, a lot of other stuff here, but then in the 5th measure we have the 4 chord again. All right, then in the 7th measure, again, we have the 1 chord. In the 9th measure, where we're looking to hear the 5 chord, we do have it there, but we have a related chord, a 2 minor in front of it, but still we have the 5 in the 9th measure. Then here in the 11th measure, we usually have a B flat, but we have a substitute, a D minor 9, or it could be D minor 7, which is actually the 3 chord of B flat major. And if you know your substitute harmonies for major, you'll know that a 3 and a 6 chord can be substituted for 1. And this is common that you'll see this here. Remember, this last 2 bars is a turnaround, so you're always looking for some way to get yourself back to the top. So this is a common thing that will happen. People will put a 3 chord here rather than going back to the 1. So that's what I've done here. Alright, so that you can see that even though there's a lot of chords here, that basic structure of a blues is still there. Now let's take a closer look at each of these chords and how they resolve. So the B flat resolves up a 4th to the E flat. Again, this is what we call a quick 4. And then the E flat, rather than resolving to the next measure, we have a delayed resolution over to the A flat, which is up a 4th. Alright, so we need our solid arrow. Then here, remember, when we see a minor chord followed by a dominant down a half step, that's a chromatic 2-5. So we need to put our dotted bracket underneath. And then A flat goes down a half step, or sorry, A goes down a half step to A flat. So we'll put our dotted arrow there. A flat, up a 4th to D flat. So we need to put a solid arrow there. D flat, up to E flat. That's a whole step up, so we need our dotted arrow there. E flat, up a 4th to A flat, so we need a solid arrow there. Now it's A flat, it has a delayed resolution. It's actually delaying over to this B flat here, which is up a whole step, so we're going to put a dotted arrow, because remember, when you're going up a half step, you need a dotted arrow. Now again here, we have the C minor to a B7, so C, a minor chord followed by a dominant chord down a half step. That's going to be a chromatic 2-5, so we do our dotted bracket here. And this B7 has a double resolution. It resolves down a half step to this B flat here, but also it resolves up a whole step to this D flat minor 7 here. Now that's, in my personal opinion, kind of stretching it a little bit, but you know, usually I try to only have delay resolutions up to 1 bar, maybe 2, but I'm putting it in there just so you can kind of see that. I don't think you'd really hear that, but you know, I put it in there anyway just for clarity. Alright, so then we have our 1 chord here, exactly where it should be, and that resolves up a whole step to the C minor. And then we have some parallel movement. We're moving from the C minor up to the D minor, down to the D flat minor, down to the C minor. So especially here, we're just moving chromatically down with the same chord type, which you'll see happening a lot in music, where somebody just take any, you can take any chord type in music and just move it up and down in half steps, either up or down, it doesn't matter, and that's just chromatic movement. There is one other thing that's happening here. If we thought of this as B flat major, all right, C minor would be the 2 chord, D minor would be the 3 chord, just like we were talking about here if this was from major. So you're really just borrowing this C minor and the D minor from a parallel major key, because remember, this is a Mixolydian key because it's a dominant chord. And that's common for people to borrow chords from a parallel mode, and that's really what's going on here. Not that important right now that you know that, but I'm just pointing it out for those of you that might be aware of that information. Alright, now we also have this B flat chord resolving up a whole step to this C minor here. Personally, I don't think you really would hear that much, but again, I've just put that in there. It is a delayed resolution. Here we have a 2-5, because C up a fourth to F. So remember, if you have a minor chord followed by a dominant chord up a fourth, that's a what we call 2-5, and whenever you see that, you want a solid arrow underneath. All right. Then we have the F9 chord, has two resolutions. It resolves down a half step to the E9, and then delayed resolution up a whole step to this G. Again, I think that's kind of pushing it a little bit, but I'm just putting it in there for clarity so you can see that in many cases chords will resolve in multiple ways in multiple places. So I put that in there as a delayed resolution. Then we have a bunch of stuff just moving down in half steps. So we got E moving down a half step to E flat, so we put our dotted arrow, E flat down to D minor, down a half step, so that's our dotted arrow. Then again, we have a D minor, moves up a fourth to G7, so that's a 2-5, right? So we put our solid bracket underneath that. Our G13 resolves up a fourth to the C minor, so we put our solid arrow there. Look here again, we have a C minor down a half step to B, so that's a chromatic 2-5, so we're going to put our dotted bracket there. And then of course the B resolves down a half step to the B flat. So that's the B flat chord progression. As you can see, much more complicated, but really all the chords are resolving. And what I've, to come up with this is all I've done is I've just said, just made sure that every chord resolved. And I'm usually moving backwards. Like I'd start here, put this in, then put that in, and then put this in, because that resolves to there, and then put this in. So a lot of times I'm moving backwards when I'm building these initially. After a while, you just kind of know how to do this. That takes a few years of playing before you can just kind of automatically do that. But as you can see, that you can really get a quite complicated chord progression just by following some of these simple rules of a dominant chord can resolve up a fourth, up a whole step, or down a half step, and you can put related two chords in front of it. And it really gives you a lot of variety.